Hello everyone, welcome to another session of VWO webinar, where experts in digital marketing, experimentation, data and product share their trade tips and inspiring stories for you to learn from. I am Shanaz, Marketing Manager at VWO. For those of you who do not know what VWO is a full funnel A/B testing, experimentation and conversion rate optimization platform. Today we have with us Henk, Product Specialist CRO at Reprise Digital. Erstwhile known as Traffic for You, Reprise Digital is one of Netherlands' leading digital marketing agencies. As Henk puts it, Henk loves working with customers and building products they fall in love with. Henk, if you could please turn on your camera. Thank you for
Hi.
doing this. I am absolutely sure that there will be a plethora of insights to take back from the session today.
Yeah.
Before I pass on the mic to you, I'd just like to thank everyone for tuning in from all over the world and also inform everyone that we'll be taking questions at the end of the session. So please feel free to drop in your questions at any given point during the presentation. With that, Henk, the stage is all yours.
Cool. Thank you very much, Shanaz, for your introduction. When we tend to look conversion rate optimization or experimentation on the internet, we're most likely to find articles or blog posts written about how conversion rate optimization is done, or what are the best practices we should use, or what is conversion rate optimization. But from the years of experience, I actually done conversion rate optimization. There's one thing I've actually learned which is so important, and that's communication. Because you can be the best experimenter or the best CRO specialist, but if you fail to really communicate the importance of conversion rate optimizations or the outcomes of your research or the results of your A/B testings, what success does your CRO program have? So today we're going to talk about the real C in CRO, which I think stands for communication. We're going to talk about how to optimize for communication to create a testing culture. And the goal of this presentation is to give you all an idea why communication is so important within the CRO process. What is communication and why do we actually need it within this process? I'm finally going to end with 6 lessons or tips you can use basically tomorrow, how to improve your communication. But first, a short introduction to who I am. My name is Henk Bolhuis, and I'm Product Specialist Conversion Rate Optimization at Reprise Digital. Basically, what my job entails is that I help consultants become better at their jobs. My job is to help them accelerate in conversion rate optimization. And one of the things I believe is strongly important is to have both soft skills and hard skills that make the best out of the consultant. For today, I actually have 4 topics on this program. So first of all, we're going to briefly talk about why communication is just as important as conversion. Next up, we're going to talk about how communication fits within the CRO process. Next, I'm going to give 6 lessons on how to improve your communication. And finally, we're going to talk a little about how to continuously optimize or improve your communication skills within the whole CRO process. So when we tend to look at CRO, we often say that the C stands for conversion, or basically conversion rate optimization, which is nothing more than increasing the amount of times a visitor converts or does an important action. We can think of conversions such as, purchases, add to carts, clicking on a button, becoming leads. But one of the things I do think is really important within CRO is communication. And with communication, I mean in this context, increasing the amount of times the stakeholder understands your message and converts. That they actually say, oh wow, this is a really important insight you gave us. We should definitely focus on this. Or that you show them a really good performing A/B test that they're like, oh wow, we need to implement this tomorrow because we're losing a ton of money at the moment. Because have you experienced these reactions when you're presenting something? I know I have. People looking at your slides, going back to you and giving a subtle notice like, okay, where am I supposed to look at? Or people which you know are in your audience, but still look at your slides or what you're saying and being like, well, I'm not sure if I get it, but I'm too afraid to ask. There's definitely a really big piece of audience in there, which just doesn't dare to do that. But first, let's take a look at communication. What do we actually mean with communication? We actually have three important segments. So first of all, you have the sender, which could be, and who has a message, which could be an insight. Let's say conversion rate has dropped last week. Let's do something in order to fix it. Then you have a medium, which could be a slide deck or a short talk or a small note or an email message, also really important. And with this email and ourselves, we go to our receiver, which could be a teammate or someone else, and we bring this message towards them and hoping they understand it or not. But with respect to things we actually can influence within this process. That's us, the sender who has the message and insight, and it's the medium. So basically, we can take more time to look at our slide deck, to look at our to look at our email, think of, oh, let's not add the question which we have all the way at the bottom, let's start with it, really important one, or just make sure that the things which are really important are highlighted within the slide deck. And then there's on the other side, the receiver. This could be a teammate where you can be real nonchalant, just say, yo, there's something broken, we should do anything. But it could also sometimes be a client. And working with clients, you have different types of clients. You have clients who really know what they're doing. And you have clients who've just started beginning with conversion rate optimization. And our job, at least what I think, as a conversion rate optimization consultant, is to make sure their knowledge is up to speed and that they know what they're talking about. And in some cases, it could actually be a CEO or at least someone from the board who has to be really convinced that what you're doing is really making an impact. So why is communication so important when talking about experimentation? So we looked a bit at what communication is and why it's so important that the C within CRO is communication. But why is it so important? Well, when you look at the process of CRO, and there are lots of different processes. If you basically look at process CRO, you get tons of models. But what I always think, there are 5 crucial steps. So first step is finding problems through research. Second step is generating hypotheses. The third step is prioritizing these hypotheses, then validating them through experimentation, and then reporting and learning. It always sounds so easy, but we all know it isn't, because there's actually one really important factor which none of these models actually include, and that is you have stakeholders. You have stakeholders on each step of this process. So when finding problems, you need to really convince stakeholders that, whoa, this is something we should fix. And if you fail to do that, if you fail to show why this is an important problem to solve, if you fail to work with programmers, or if you fail to really start to share what is this learning we have, what is the uplift of this experiment, what does actually the Asian statistic is, well, your stakeholders are going to become this. They're going to be unhappy, or even worse, they're starting to unengage and just be like, well, cool, let's do that, and we'll see the next steps. Basically, what I'm trying to say, oh, apologies, to put this in practice. You can be the best analytics guru. You can know everything Google Analytics has to offer. You can build APIs. You can build events. You can make things measurable there. But if you use these slides, let's say this as an example, week numbers are positive, but there's a declining conversion rate. Well, I'll promise you here, your client or your audience will all look like this. Like, okay, so where am I looking at? What's going on this page? What is actually happening? And basically, you still have to convince them and explain the slide. You have to talk about, okay, this is important, and then they'll finally go, yeah, I get it. Now I get it. But you couldn't prevented it. Just as we optimize websites, we should definitely optimize the way how we communicate things. Basically, what I'm trying to say, if you have great knowledge of the things you have, but your communication is whack, your stakeholders are going to be like, well, let's focus on something else. But I promise you, if you have good knowledge and good communication, you can really make users, or at least your audience, engage with your message, people are definitely going to be like, yes, we should do more of this. We want to bring people together. So what I just want to say is most optimizers, just like me, just like you, just like everyone, only focus on optimizing their business. They focus on optimizing their website. But to create a culture of experimentation, communication is key. We have the responsibility to bring people together. So how can we actually do that? And I can talk about that for hours, I think, well, definitely for hours. But for today, I just want to share 6 lessons or tips I've learned along the way. And to give a brief summary, so when presenting insights, make it interactive, which I'm definitely going to talk more about in the next slides. When presenting user test findings, which we all do, user testing is a great way to get good feedback. Use a highlight video, or at least make a highlight video. When giving recommendations, there's actually, for myself, a secret formula which you should definitely follow. When working with others, be nice, smile. When showing graphs, get your data cleaned up. Make sure you have really clear graphs. Use it. And when reporting, start with the most important findings. Let's go to the first tip. When presenting insights, make it interactive. What you shouldn't do is just start off by showing data and without any context. So if we look at mobile and compare it to the desktop conversions, what do we see? So first you have to look at it. It's quite a clean graph, but you see something going up and going down. And basically the learning you can take away from this is that mobile has more than desktop. What you should be doing is to play the quizmaster rule by asking questions to your audience, or at least when the situation allows it, because when you're talking with a CEO, well, it's not that good of a thing to really start testing them by questions, but more as a playful way. So one of the questions I ask sometimes is, what's the percentage of users that bought a product in 2019 on mobile? And just look at the audience and you're saying like, well, 20%, 30%, 50%, and one person will be like, I think it's 70, and they will be looked at like at the other stakes like, well, I'm not sure, but okay, we'll see. And then you present it and you say, well, it's 69%, or basically 70% of all transactions derive from mobile. And then they're going to be like, whoa, that's quite a lot. And then you actually capture their attention. And next, you'll start showing the slides. So the thing why this is so important to ask these questions is these are the things that stick in the mind of your audience. I've had many presentations, and when you do that, there's one thing they can in the end talk about. And if there's one thing you want them to understand, or at least to remember, that's the thing you should ask. If your only goal is to make sure they should focus on mobile more instead of working on a desktop approach, actually start by showing it like, hey, this is your mobile conversion rate, or basically, hey, this is how much of your customers actually use a mobile device, and they're definitely going to be surprised. Which you could ask if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's a good insight. So next, when presenting user test findings, use a highlight video. And user testing is a way of research where we ask users to come and use our own website or a potential prototype, and we actually often record these sessions, sometimes through the tool itself, like for instance lookback.io, but through loads of other tools. And sometimes you just have your screen recorder ready so you can actually make notes afterwards. What you just shouldn't do is just present insights from a user test without any actual visuals. You can say like, hey, why is it a big website? What did we do? What did the user say? But what you actually should do, especially when doing a first user test or an important one, is to create a highlight video. And a highlight video is nothing else than, I think, showing little pieces of videos of users that basically give an important opinion about your website. For instance, when you ask them, oh, could you find the could you find article X, and that they go to the search bar, find it, and it just can't, or that they go to your page and feel like, wow, this is really complex. Or best one I still had, that the user had a really long list of errors, being like, oh no, oh, what did I do? Those are the findings you want to show. I actually had one time that I actually presented this, and was actually board of CEOs, or at least higher upper management, and really you show them the slides and they're like, yeah, okay, cool, cool. And then you show this video of a user actually using your website and complaining why things aren't broken, and the upper management stands up. It's like, why didn't we fix that? They're looking really angry at the product owner, which is not my responsibility though. But again, that's the thing you want. You want to have action. You need to make it actionable, and I strongly believe that this is a great way to do that. So how do you build a highlight video? Well, it's basically 3 steps. I would love to say simple. It's quite simple, but it could take up some time, because one of the tools I actually use is OpenShot Video Editor. And what I do is I go through all of videos and I actually note down specific parts, like for instance at 1 minute 10 user says X, and I'm like, oh, that's something I really want to use. I basically make a small snap of this video, which could be like a second or 2 or 3, and just save it in a folder. And then next, I make a video where I just compile all these videos in one lengthy movie, which should not take up longer than 3 minutes. And that's quite a challenge to make it not longer than 3 minutes, but there's definitely a lot of engagement when using a highlight video. Next tip, when giving recommendations, for instance, when doing an expert review, follow the formula. So one of the things you should never do is basically just go to a website and say, this is bad, or that's bad, or I don't think this is a good solution, or I think that's not a good solution. Opinions don't really matter in that context, because your colleague or your stakeholder will be like, well, yeah, I think it's bad too, but yeah, what are you going to do about that? Instead, what you should do is always follow this 3-step formula. So what's the observation? What kind of consequence can this have for the user? And what is the next step, or what is basically your recommendations? For example, this is our own website and it's hosted globally, so it's really hard to make any changes to it. But one of the things is, when landing on landing page, there's no clear call to action present. Basically, you land on our page, and we have this strong claim we're partners in digital growth, but basically there's nothing you can do. If you want to have contact, you want to learn more on how we do that, there's no clear call to action available. So you actually have to force people to scroll down. So that's the consequence. Users have to scroll down to learn more about what the company does, or how to even contact them. And recommendation could be like, try experimenting by adding a call to action to your website. So the thing what is so important when giving these recommendations is that these things are built up and logically built, because you're starting with what does the potential user see, what is the potential consequence, and what is the recommendation I have when what the users should be doing, or at least what you recommend the company should be doing. Another example. So when auditing a full page, and I'm not saying that the expert review when giving an audit is the best tool ever, but I think it's a real important one when actually starting with the CRO program. But this is how we do it. So when you look at this slide, there are basically 3 components. So the bottom component is your proof. And what I always do is I always just show first a screenshot. I don't show the things what you see on right clarity, value, and clarity. But I basically always start with the conclusion. So what we at the moment see is the call to action is not very outstanding design-wise compared to the rest of the page. This might cause the user not to see it. And we add a recommendation to it. Consider designing this button more prominently. So in the first conclusion, or at least in the first header of the page or of the slide, you already know what the biggest recommendation is, or at least what's the most important recommendation, and you know what you should be doing. And if people start asking questions, then next is you start with the proof. So based on these and these and these principles, we think this should be better. And then there's something like, ah, yeah, we should be doing that. Now let's go to our next lesson. When working with others, be nice, smile. But this is one of the best books I've actually ever read and still really close to me, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. And this book can actually be summarized in 2 words, which actually a colleague of mine said a couple of years ago, be nice. And actually, as this book sounds really commercial, it actually is the true story of how to influence people and win friends, is to be nice. So what you should be doing is, first of all, change your tone. Don't try to learn not to talk only in one voice, or at least in one tone, because it's, not to be hard, but it's sometimes quite boring to listen to it. You have to be energetic, show your enthusiasm, but also don't be over enthusiastic. Be critical when needed, especially when talking to higher upper management or people who have a really big stakeholder. Smile, or when working more from home, use emojis, because smiling people get more done. It's actually scientifically proven that smiling people are really more engaging to work with. And then there's complimenting, and I strongly believe we don't do this enough. We often say, yeah, I really appreciate you, but we don't often, if we're really honest, show it. Be happy. Show them like, oh my God, this is perfect. This is great. You did a good job. You're the best. And people really like sometimes, as you can see on the right, the emotional approach when looking from working aspect. I don't think we should be boring. I think we should be enthusiastic. I think we should be happy. And if we're happy, I strongly believe we will have happy lives. And finally, be super clear. Make sure you really design clear what you want. I've had multiple A/B tests or things where I said, "Oh, we should change it," and I get it back, and I test it, and it's not really what it's supposed to be. And you're like, "Well, this is not what I thought it would be." Well, that's what you said what it would be. And then you're like, oh, here we go again. And basically, we're wasting everybody's time. So be super clear. Take your time to design or to consider what you actually want. When showing graphs or anything regarding to data, get your data cleaned out. What you just shouldn't do is just copy paste Google Analytics findings, or basically go to Google Analytics, say, oh, this is an interesting site, slap it on there, or really complex Excel sheets, because people are going to ask questions such as, well, what am I looking at? And are going to ask questions like, so what's actually good or bad? If you look at this slide on the left, it's Dutch, but you see there's sometimes red, you see it's about site speeds, but there's some red at the bottom. Should we address all these things? What's the key takeaway we should really be doing? Because we should ask ourselves, is this all relevant? What's the real thing we should be? What's the real thing we should be doing? Is there a recommendation? I think we can all show as much data as we can, but if it's not actionable, people won't take action. So what you should do is make data actionable. Sometimes it is really important just to show a couple of numbers, like 40% of the sessions have less than two seconds the session durations, from which 60% are from paid, which is quite a high load of users. And basically what I said, 40% of our traffic has less than 2 second session duration, 60 of which come from a paid source. Our recommended action is to investigate this issue with the marketing and try to find ways to include bots in our marketing efforts, if any is possible. Basically, you can apply the same rule from this book to your slides. I really think Steve Crook, Don't Make Me Think. Basically, the book says what it's about. Don't make the user think. Make sure you're clear in what you're trying to tell. We always look from these principles to our websites, but it's actually the same way we can look at these principles to ourselves, or the way how we communicate things. Tip 6, or basically lesson 6, start with the most important findings. Yeah, what you shouldn't just do is end with your key takeaways and just save it all for the end. No, you should always start with them. And especially when showing A/B test results, you should answer questions like, what did we learn? What were the results? What's the conclusion? And what possible next steps can we take from this? The goal of taking things to the front instead of the back is that you want to have the discussion of like, oh, I don't agree with this, not at the end of your presentation, but at the beginning of your presentation. Because at the beginning of the presentation, you still have the power of saying, well, we're going to discuss this in a later stage. And then people are like, okay, cool. And if you're starting it from the end and people still have questions, well, let me go back to this slide. And then you have to explain again. So it costs time. So that's always where you should start with your key takeaways. As a final reminder, these were 6 lessons to create a culture for experimentation in which communication is key. Now, finally, how to further improve yourself. So first of all, ask for feedback, especially when doing slide decks or for instance, talking to participants. Make sure people are on there, people are listening to what you're doing, and ask for feedback. Ask if what I'm saying is clear to them, or someone who you don't even know. Yesterday, I actually showed this presentation to my girlfriend, and she's in the music industry, and so she has a completely different view of things than I have. And she's one of my most critical listeners, so I was really afraid showing this to her. Second is listen to your audience. So what response do you get when showing X, when showing this slide? What are they looking at? What comments are they making? Or are they squinting their eyes that they really start to focus on things? Those are the small key things you can observe and being like, okay, I think we should do this better. One of the things which helped me a lot is to collect slides. I often also visit webinars because I think they're really interesting ways of learning more and becoming a better consultant. But one of the things I sometimes see is like, hey, that's an interesting way of how they're doing that. And I basically copy paste it in a really big Google Slides file, and that's basically my swipe file. And finally, but not least, always keep optimizing yourself, because it will help you become better, optimize, and achieve your goals. And with that, we're slowly coming to the end of this short, but I think truly powerful presentation. And I wonder if there are any questions. If not, feel free to follow up on LinkedIn. I strongly could always not. Sometimes it's not possible to answer all questions, but if any, please go ahead.
Awesome. I think that was a truly very insightful presentation. Some things that are often very easily overlooked yet play a very important role in the entire process and the entire journey that CRO is.
Yeah.
So we do have a few questions. I've clubbed all of them together just to save time.
Yeah.
So this question that's come here, and I can answer that for the viewers. Will we get copies of the recording and the slides? So yes, in the next 24 to 48 hours, we'll be uploading the webinar recording as well as the presentation deck onto our website. We'll also be emailing all the attendees as well as non-attendees uh, the link to the deck and the recording. So that's there.
Cool.
Second question, which is directed towards you, and this again is a combination of a couple of questions. How can we ensure that we overcome HIPPO by rightly communicating data? Are there any tips that you can share?
Yes, definitely. So when showing data, less is more. So there are 2 tips I would love to share. So first of all, Dark Horse Analytics. They actually make GIFs or GIFs, I'm not sure how you actually pronounce them correctly, on how to make data more clear. Secondly is, I think it's an HBR, Harvard Business Review book. It's called Good Graphs. And it's a book which really goes in depth on how to present data. So a couple of things I just said in the presentation were, make sure data is actionable. If you're just showing them a slide where you're just basically saying, this is not going well, you're not doing your job. You should always add recommendations to it. You need to make data actionables. What is the recommended action we should take based on this data? And it's actually also the thing how you should look at data. We should also always answer questions by answering data, by looking at data, apologies. So for instance, if I want to know, so if one of the questions I might have, let me just think one really quickly, what is the conversion rate on mobile and how does that differ on other devices? It's a legit question and we can answer that, but there's also a thing we should do next, and that is make sure we add a recommended action to it. So I do hope that answered this question. So first of all, dark horse analytics, Google that stuff, and second thing, good graphs, great book, you should definitely read it.
Thanks, Hank. We have a question related to this question. So Bethany Gaini is asking if you could repeat the name of the first resources that you mentioned in regards to.
Sure. So Dark Horse, Dark Horse Analytics is the first one, and Good Graphs, HBR book, is the second one. Those two resources you should definitely look up or investigate into.
Yeah. Thank you. We have another question from Alvier Marqueses. Alvier says we submit weekly reports to our supervisors in an email format. How do we know that we are not presenting too much information or too little detail?
So one of the two tips I could give you is, first of all, sometimes we tend to work so much in our own bubble that we tend to forget what is really important. So one of the things could be like asking someone externally, like a colleague, like, hey, if you look at this email, ask them 2 questions or 3 questions. What is this? What data do you see here? And what's the recommended action you should take on it? So first of all, ask colleagues in terms of like what if this long email is actually meaning. In my own experience, often when I get really long emails, I just scroll down, just look at the things which are important, and then go away. So what I always would recommend is adding again what I just said, a short summary. What are the most important findings at the start? So what are the things we should definitely look at? And what is triggering me to scroll down more? Long lists and things of emails. We get a ton of emails, especially these days when looking at COVID. I think things should be concise, clear, and if people want to dive into them even more, they definitely will.
Yeah. All right. I hope that answers your question, Alvier. Now moving on to a combination of a couple more questions which you can answer at once.
Yeah.
You've already given names of resources that our audience can refer to for conveying data. But is there any books or podcast or article or any other thing like a video that you would recommend personally or professionally, whatever you're reading now in your personal time and professional time, that you think the audiences could?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. At the moment, I'm reading Rework from the founders of Basecamp. I think it's a really good book because it's really nice and concise. But the 2 books I actually mentioned in this presentation are always my all-time favorites. So first of all, Steve Krug, Don't Make Me Think, because it's still, I think I read this book, I think 10 years, no, that's a long time ago, at least 6, 7 years ago when I started doing college, and I actually read it again and again, and you're still like, it's such a simple book, and it just helps you understand things so clearly. And second thing, if you really want to shift from the way how you do things now to a way where you actually help people or people want to start working with you, I would still say Dale Carnegie, How to Influence People and Make Friends. Although it sounds really commercial, it is not. I think it's a really easy and friendly approach on how to get people towards you. Let me think if there's anything else which skips my now. I think those three would be, I think, now most interesting. So rework, um, Dale Carnegie's How to Influence People and Make Friends, and Steve Krug's Don't Make Me Think. Those would be the three I would definitely read, and that actually be the most helpful for my own personal career.
All right, awesome. Thank you, Hank, for answering that. We have another question.
Cool.
We'll make this the last question of the evening. It is by Brenda. How can you make sure you aligned communication between marketing and product teams?
Whew. Yeah, that's also a really good one. So one of the things I tend to experience, and where I know I'm also not that good at is you have product teams, so people working on a product, and you have marketing teams, and there's just one giant wall between them. They're not communicating with each other. They're doing their own thing, and marketing says like we're doing a huge campaign on this landing page, and the development team's like, well, we're just gonna do work on adding a cute cat gif on the thank you page. Um, I I strongly believe that this is a thing which requires a change in upper management. Actually, from experience in a previous company, I saw that marketing was doing its own thing, development was doing their own thing, and it cost the company a lot of money. Um, what I would recommend, and although this is, I'm not sure if this is the best way to do it, is first of all create attention that this is a problem. So from on the end, we have marketing people going left, and on the other end, there are product people going right. Second of all, you need to show what's the pain, and I think that's so important. You need to really make it hurt. Saying like, yeah, we're losing tons of money that people are just not aligned to each other. That will help you get attention from your key stakeholders, or at least your upper management. And first, you have to recommend. So how can we move together? I would never just throw everybody in one room and say like, let's brainstorm something and hope something magical would come out. It doesn't though. But I would come up with a plan. Like, okay, what would be from my end be the best way to make this happen, to make sure people start working together? And then I think it's important to have one stakeholder from marketing, one from product where which you can rely upon. Okay, are you guys or girls, whatever, agreeing with what I think you are? Do you have any things to add on? And they're like, yes. And then step 4 is present that, work together, and from there on, make sure you have a simple agreement. So first it would be like, okay, let's make sure we have a meeting each 2 weeks where we discuss what are the biggest things going on. And finally, by really adding up by having KPIs, which should be aligned on each time. So with KPIs the marketing team has should be the same KPIs to some extent what the product team has, so that you really are relying upon each other.
Yeah.
And that's basically what I would do.
Yeah, I agree, Hank. I think till the time that product team, marketing team, and every other team that is involved in the CRO program is aligned with the team level goals as well as the overall organizational or company level goals, it should be not pretty easy, but fairly easy to sort of just prioritize what to pick up first and what test to run first. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly.
All right, that was awesome, Hank. This was an absolutely information-packed and insightful session. I am so thankful that you agreed to do this with us,
Sure.
and I really do hope that we get another opportunity in the future to do something like this again, and
Oh,
you can come.
definitely. Definitely.
Absolutely, yeah. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in for today's session with Hank, and we'll see you again soon